Frankie say we're number one. Relax was due to be released and a promotional campaign would need to be planned and a promotional video would need to be made. The debut single was to be distributed by ZTT's partner Island Records. Although Island wasn't our parent company, it was a buzz for all of us to have a small connection with the label. This was the home of Bob Marley, the B-52s and U2. The owner of the label, Chris Blackwell, had brought the world so much great music that if I listed them all here it would take me forever. The fact that Frankie are included on that list is a huge honour for me. We would need some photographs and we went back to see photographer and fellow Liverpudlian John Stoddart. He'd taken some promo pictures of us earlier that year and we'd enjoyed his company and he was one of our own. The first session we had done with John had produced a knife fellatio picture showing the lower half of Paul's torso and Holly's head in a suggestive pose. Paul had a knife sticking out of his leather knickers and Holly was posing with his mouth over the end of the knife. At the time, none of the band, or John, thought that this was particularly rude or offensive, but I can see why some people got upset about it. The newer pictures of the band that John captured were slightly tamer than our first shoot and were deemed as being a bit more conventional. A friend of Holly's called Yvonne Gilbert had recently done some erotic illustrations for Men Only magazine. Holly contacted her and a bunch of them were sent over to Bob's office. There were two in contention for the Relax sleeve. The one we ended up using and another illustration featuring a photographer and tripod in the distance framed by a pair of woman's legs in the foreground. Mark Ped and I preferred the one with the tart's legs, but Paul and Holly liked having the muscle man in the picture as well as the woman. The muscle man one definitely fitted the shape of a picture sleeve, so we relented and that one was chosen. It was a great illustration and I would never tire of seeing it in the coming years when it was shoved under my nose along with a request for an autograph. ZTT had decided on a young director called Bernard Rose to direct the video. It was to feature Holly walking through a bar, encountering the strange and the perverted en route before ending up rolling around on a stage with a tiger. The rest of the band would be in there, somewhere, playing small cameos. The video was filmed in an old theatre off Cable Street in East London. It's still there today and it's now called Wilton's Music Hall and claims to be the oldest grand music hall in the world. Holly and Paul invited a bunch of freaky friends and drag queens to make up the rest of the cast, and other extras were drafted in, including a guy called John Dare. John Dare was the fat guy in the thong looking like Nero on the balcony. Any fan, myself included, would know John as Crusher from the BBC comedy Porridge. He played the role of Harry Grout's henchman and was usually looming menacingly in the background when Harry was in the frame. He was Scottish and a great laugh, and he would appear in future Frankie videos at our request. Even today, I love seeing his face crop up every now and then on the various satellite channels that repeat the classic show. In recent years, I seem to remember a conversation with Holly or Paul where I was told that all of the guys sitting at the bar in one of the opening sequences had all passed away, most of them dying from AIDS. In 1983, very little people knew about AIDS, and the people at the bar that day probably had no idea of what would hit their community and the world in the next couple of years. Paul and Holly knew almost every one of the extras on the shoot, and it was the first time the three of us had met Juicy Lucy and Mark Time and the other colourful peacocks that volunteered their leather feathers that day. This was our first taste of pop video, and it was a very long day. Apart from getting up close to a real tiger for about 2 minutes, the day was pretty boring too. In subsequent videos, the band never had as many people worried about their mental state as we had on set that day worrying about the tiger's health and whether the lights and crowds would make it freak out. It's a little insulting to refer to such grace and majesty as it, so we will use her name. She was Tess, and apparently she was the daughter of the tiger in the famous Esso commercials. In Animal Hollywood, she was A-list, or at very least, daughter of A-list. A bit like Willow Smith, but with stripes and bigger claws. My parts were brief, and basically we were standing about most of the day whilst watching Holly perform for the close-ups and the lip-syncing shots. Making videos is not great fun. I guess the real fun happens when you get back to the edit suite and have a look at what you've shot and begin to get creative. I don't know what the video cost, but it wasn't a lot of money compared to what other bands were spending at the time, and looking back at it now, we did get a lot of bang for our buck. Video was a new medium for pop music and was now the main vehicle for promotion following the launch of MTV 2 years earlier. Everybody was making videos, and they were either lip sync performances or some sort of short movie relating loosely to the song. This new medium required musicians to have to become actors as well. In the opening bar scene of the Relax video, I was lurking in the background and supposed to be acting like I was involved with the other guys in goading and pushing Holly, but I felt a bit of a tit, to be honest. I could have reached over the bar and grabbed her tit as Angie's bangers were breaking loose from her top with every shake of her hips. Have a look at my grid next time you see the video and you can tell how alien I felt. I didn't mind the shot blowing the long trumpet as that was vaguely musical, but acting was not in my portfolio. When the video was first seen, it did cause more than a few raised eyebrows and would later be banned by the BBC and MTV. Looking back at it now, I don't think it was very shocking even for those times. It was hardly pornography. In fact, it was more like smutty innuendo, and that was something that had run through British culture for years before Frankie arrived. Maybe because it was gay smutty innuendo was the reason for the introduction of the TV ban. Luckily, our new allies in the northeast at the Tube didn't mind broadcasting it. There was never any great master plan about trying to get the video banned. Under the direction of Bernard Rose, we had tried to create a piece of promotional art, for want of a better phrase. I think I'm speaking more for Bernard than the band, but I don't think anybody goes through the effort of filming something on location with a load of extras and even catering to get it banned and not shown. The single was released to mixed reviews, as can be seen from the couple I've included. The Enemy said, basically a chant over the rhythmic vibration of the very latest digital kitchen sinks. Others were a little kinder. Smash Hits said, naughty lyrics that will shock the powers that be at the BBC, which is a shame as this Trevor Horn-produced powerhouse dance record screams out to be heard. I don't know how much radio play we got during that first week, but the single entered the charts on the 12th of November 1983 at number 77. Does that mean it's a hit? I remember being very pleased but a little disappointed at the same time. I really believed that if people could hear it, then it would be a hit. A promotional tour was to be booked by Gary Blackburn at Island Records, and we would be taking our slab of pop to the masses. Holly and Paul were spending more time in London, and the recording of Relax had meant that we hadn't done any live gigs for ages, although we turned up at very late notice to do Larks in the Park that summer in Liverpool. I've recently seen photographs and I'm playing someone else's guitar, so I think we were using another band's equipment. The fact that Paul was missing meant that this gig may have even been arranged as late as the night before. I'd not been in the band for the performance at last year's event, and it was great to have a chance to play there. It was a nice enough day, and as always there was a good turnout on the grassy bank opposite the bandstand and lake. Paul wasn't the only one who was absent that day, as the Leather Pets had gone also. I can't remember how they had drifted off the radar, but they'd been replaced. As the promotional shows were personal appearances rather than gigs, it wasn't necessary for Mark or I to go, which was just as well, as we were both still working for the Corpy. We would have loved to have done the whole tour, but we were saving favours and holidays in case they were needed further down the line. 3 people were recruited from the Relax video shoot. Angie, the busty blonde barmaid, Juicy Lucy, the outrageous drag queen, and Mark Time, the former hot gossip dancer. Holly, Paul and Ped with the accompanying troupe would appear on stage and mime, or sometimes perform with just live vocals to the assembled masses. I wish I could have seen one of those performances from out front. Complete mayhem in 5 minutes with all sorts of mad shit going on, with an absolute killer track pounding in your ears and making your feet tap. Yes, please. The first 3 shows were between the 16th and 18th of November at Eve's Club in Wolverhampton, Faces Club in Birmingham and the Maestro Club in Glasgow, and then Mark and I joined the circus at the Hacienda in Manchester on the 19th. Holly came on stage on a motorbike, a stunt repeated a week later at the Camden Palace, and these were the only shows that Mark and I did, if I remember correctly. My only proper memory from Manchester was a bowl of fruit getting trashed backstage at the Hacienda. It was dangerous to leave that sort of stuff lying around after an adrenaline-fueled 5 or 10 minutes and a few beers. I remember the Camden Palace PA as I was sat astride the Harley-Davidson bike we'd managed to blag from someone for the gig. To date, it's the only time I've ever sat on a Harley. Whilst Trevor had been spending a large amount of time and money in the studio, the 3 musicians in Liverpool had been writing some new songs, and one of the new ones was a backing track that would eventually become The Power of Love. Unfortunately, we didn't have the wealth of recording equipment that was housed in Sound West. We'd bought a few little toys between us, and I remember recording The Power of Love in the O'Toole bedroom in his mum's house in Clubmore. 2 of the 4 boys still lived at home, and they had 2 sets of bunk beds in the largest bedroom. Our control room was the top bunk of one set, and our live area was the bottom bunk of the other. We recorded the demos on a Fostex X15, one of the new available small home porter studios, which actually belonged to Mark's younger brother Colin. Ped programmed a basic beat into his new drum machine, and Mark and I played along. The whole of my guitar part was like the solo that ended up on the release version, distorted and echoing away into infinity. Now there's a shock. That edge had a lot to answer for. I believe that Black Night White Light was also written around this period because both songs appeared on the John Peel sessions we recorded in December 1983. We had 2 new songs and needed 2 more, so we dusted off Junk Funk and included that along with a cover version of the T-Rex hit Get It On. The truth behind this selection of cover had more to do with Ped being able to program it into the drum box and not so much to do with our love of T-Rex. We'd originally fancied doing Thin Lizzy's The Boys Are Back in Town, but in them days you couldn't get the drum machine to shuffle properly. This sort of equipment was all new then and not very easy to use. Ped had a sequential circuits drum tracks that was like a cheaper version of the Lindrum that was being used by everyone including Trevor, as he ended up using it on Relax. So much for 3 days in the manor trying to get the drum sound. That didn't pan out very well, did it? We could have bought our own Lindrum for less money than we'd spent in the manor. In the final weeks of 1983, Relax was looking like it had made a good initial impact on the charts, but it was running out of steam and needed help if it was to go any further. After its initial entry at 77, it had stalled for a week, and by the 17th of December, it looked like we had shot our bolt and it was about to begin a swift drop down the pop charts. It slipped from 54 to 55 on the crest of our initial wave, and our knights in shining armour at the Tube came to our rescue. The Tube were rightly staking a claim to their share in our success and thought it would be nice to try and help us up a couple of more rungs on the pop ladder. If we were successful, then it would make them look like the cool daddies they were. If we weren't successful, there was a chance we would get dropped from the label. A lot of money had been spent on this single, an amount bigger than some bands had set aside for an album budget. ZTT were only committed to 1 single, and if that flopped, they could walk away and take the rest of our catalogue with them. We travelled up to Newcastle and did a live TV performance of Relax and Ferry Crossed the Mersey with live vocals in the Tyne T studios. We employed some of the stunts used on the PA tour and took a motorbike on stage with us. The bike was just furniture as there was no room in the studio to be riding it about, so we draped a scantily clad young lady called Siobhan Doyle on top of it and parked it behind Holly. The boost from this appearance put us up to 46, which meant we could now be included on the mighty Radio 1 playlist. What a fantastic Christmas present. The first time I heard Relax played on the radio was in that first week in 1984. I was still sparking away in my better paying day job and had been sent to work in an outbuilding somewhere in Sefton Park. I was an apprentice to a man called Paul who was pretty sound, and we'd been working together in the months before Christmas, and this was one shite job we were on. We were rewiring this damp, dark stone building in a type of cable called pyro. It was never the easiest stuff to work with, and the main drawback was that the white powder encased within the outer copper sheath to insulate the conductors absorbed water quicker than pop stars absorb cocaine. If the cable got remotely damp, this could set you back badly. Not a good idea to be installing it in a damp outhouse with a leaking roof in the middle of winter, in the middle of a park, and having to keep everything dry as a bone. Paul knew about the band and he often had the usual pops at me about fucking bench singers and Frankie fucking who. You'll never get anywhere with a fucking shite name like that, lads, I'm telling you. So there I was, freezing my arse off in Sefton Park listening to Radio 1, and I heard the intro synth of Relax crackling through the speaker of the shitty little radio we listened to. Hey Paul, this is our fucking record, check it out. We stopped work and listened, and I can tell by his face that he's well impressed with the song and the fact that our shite name Never Going Anywhere band with singing arse bandits were on national radio. The song finishes. Tell you what, mate, that's fucking sound now. Fucking hit record that, lads. all fucking day long. Now get your pop star ass down the ladder and get down the calf and get us a cup of tea, 'cause I'm fucking freezing. The Radio 1 airplay was working. We got to 35 in that first week of January, and we were starting to believe that we could get higher. The boost from the Tube appearance and the resultant airplay took the record to another level in terms of national exposure, and we knew that we were now within a whisker of grabbing another TV slot in the hallowed halls of the BBC, a place where childhood dreams could be fulfilled. We got the call from Top of the Pops. You'd think we'd all be freaking out, but since the Tube appearance, we felt there was a momentum behind us, and we kind of expected this was going to happen. I don't think it was an arrogance thing on our part, but it was just something, and I can't describe it any other way. Maybe it was fate, or whatever name you'd have for it. This is what all of us had ever wanted to do, to be on the same show that had brought us David Bowie, Roxy Music and Slade. We'd seen all our heroes on the stages at Top of the Pops, and we were going to be treading the very same boards as the gods that had inspired us. We hired some tuxedos from Moss Bros and headed down to Wood Lane to TV Centre. Holly borrowed a leather jacket from someone and trousers from someone else to wear for the broadcast. Here we were, about to go on telly to perform to the nation, and our singers bum and clobber off people because we're all skint. Top of the Pops is a long day. You have 4 or 5 run-throughs of the show, and you have to be there first thing in the morning. The studio's very small compared to how it looks on TV, and the only people there for the first run-through are the cameraman and half a dozen professional audience members. These were guys and girls who turned on party time at the flick of a switch, and I admired their enthusiasm for the job at that time of the morning. Having just tried my hand at acting, I was impressed that they could turn on Soho Disco 2 a.m. at 9 in the morning. It was the show's 20th anniversary show, so there was a chance that the ratings would be up a little higher as they'd be screening clips from the last 20 years. How fitting that our debut show was to be hosted by 2 men who had played their part in the journey that had got us to this point. John Peel and David Jensen would be the 2 men to introduce us when we opened the show. How cool that one of the bands Mark and I had worshipped on the show would also be there. Slades were on because they were currently at number 2 in the chart with My Oh My. Is this one of these mad coincidences, fate, or being in the right place at the right time? We do our run-throughs and our final dress rehearsal and then retire to the bar on the top floor of TV Centre for a couple of swift beers before showtime. After getting the ale in, Mark and I end up standing at the bar with Don Powell and Jimmy Lee of Slade, and they're really sound and talking to us like we're equals and just some guys in another band. I was still a teenager, and here I am having a beer with the rhythm section of one of my favourite bands and about to appear on a TV show that I still watch religiously myself. I didn't know it then, but Don and Jimmy would be the first of many heroes I would meet in the coming years. Things were about to go up a gear.